Hey guys, soup broth day. So many of you have been asking, after failed attempts at making bone broth, how do I get the most out of my nutrition? What is the trick to making bone broth not just taste good, but also provide optimum health and nutrition? As some of you know, and others may not know, I've had some poor health in my past life, and bone broth has literally saved my life, or at least I think so. At a time where digestion was not working for me and I was having unwanted rapid weight loss, I was not absorbing nutrients. I was also diagnosed with osteopenia, which means thinning of the bones. That's because you are not getting the nutrition in your body, and so your bones are not getting what it needs to be strong. And at a time where my health was declining, it was not only recommended by my GI doc, but I also had to undergo a repair in my spine, and it was recommended there also to help heal and recover more quickly from the surgery itself. It has been an amazing medicine and food for me that I still, to this day, consume on a weekly basis. And the great thing about bone broth is it is so nutrient dense because of what we put into it, but also based on the length of time and some of the acidic, whether it's vinegar or whether it's a lemon, that acid that we add into the bone broth helps break down the calcium, the bone itself, and you get the nutrients from inside the bone, the marrow. So when you go, you can do the research, the amount of amino acids and bodybuilding nutrients that comes from the bones, that is what we want to ingest. And when you ingest a liquid inside of your body, in your stomach, it can much more easily absorb it. It doesn't have to wait until food gets broken down and going into the intestines. So if you have a compromised digestive system, it is harder for your body to take in the nutrients in a solid form, and in liquid form, it does it much more efficiently. So bone broth is a way to get that medicine, the nutrients, the amino acids, all those building blocks into your body and highly absorbed. So here we go. One of the other cool things about bone broth is the old vegetables that you have inside of your refrigerator that would be something you may not want to consume, but they're not yet moldy. You can put in your bone broth because you're not going to be eating those vegetables later. You are going to be consuming in liquid form all the nutrients that came out of the vegetables. So throwing in older peppers that are wrinkly, totally acceptable. In my case, I chose a lemon that's the outside peel was getting a little bit hard and it's drying up a little bit, but it still has its acid content and it still has its nutrients in it. My celery, there too. It's not brown, it's yellowed, and the tops and that nutrients is going to be in there. If you're not a fan of kale, you put it in there. You'll still get the nutrients from the kale that has been boiled down because, again, that stuff is getting pulled out afterwards. One of the other things this time, I've got some leftover cabbage. I made homemade sauerkraut, which is another really good tool for your digestion and bringing in the good bacteria you want to help you break down solid foods. That's another video for another time, but in the meantime, cabbage provides a unique layer of flavor. It's actually kind of sweet, but good nutrients. The more diverse you are, of course, the more diverse your nutrients that are going in there. So be creative. Also, today I'm putting in some spinach. I always put in carrots. They have a sweet element. And I have a wrinkly apple. Hasn't been molded, but I've sliced and diced this, taken out the seeds. In this case, you don't want to consume the apple seeds. And we're going to put that in our bone broth as well. So that goes in, and along with a lot of garlic and some onion, those fantastic nutrients. It's be creative. You can mask flavors or change flavors based on your spices. You may or may not know that spices also can provide some incredible nutrients into your body, like fennel. Fennel is a great nutrient, and that's going in here today. And along with some rosemary, lots, like I said, lots of garlic. That's got a whole wide spectrum of good things for your body. And the rosemary I chose, yes, has some great qualities to it, but it also is a great flavor when it comes down to chicken. And I found the lemon does too. That rosemary is being added because the chicken I chose, which was already roasted at your grocery store, they cooked it with rosemary and garlic. So it just helps bring out those flavors along that particular theme. And the bone broth batch that you make will change based on whatever you put in. When you add an apple or you add carrots, it may have a sweeter flavor to it. One of the things with bone broth, one of the important things is to take as much meat off of a cooked carcass as you can. And that's because the meat is actually not going to be edible. It's 24-hour cook time. So when it comes down to the meat, you take it off, and if you want, you can put it back in later. By itself, just sipping bone broth plain, I find quite delightful. I actually even have it sometimes for breakfast. I'm a fan, not just because it helped bring me and my body back to life, but I have found playing with the different flavors. Each time you do a batch, it can be different. One of the testaments that I can say in regards to bone broth is 6 months after I was diagnosed with that osteopenia, that thinning of the bones, actually had a motorcycle accident and fell off, really damaging my hip. And when I was in emergency, they thought both my elbow and my hip had to be broken. With or without osteopenia wasn't the question. It was a pretty bad injury. So of course they took me in and did an x-ray and didn't see anything. They went in and did a CT scan when I exclaimed, "I can't believe it. I was diagnosed with osteopenia 6 months ago." They did the CT to check for hairline fractures at the very least, and they couldn't believe how strong they saw the bones there. In addition, when I had my neck surgery, after my 2-week checkup, they were shocked at the level of healing that had taken place. And the bone donor that was placed inside, the bone that was placed inside my neck, the bone has many holes, and your own body fills in those empty holes from that donor bone that's replaced in there. And they couldn't believe in 2 weeks that in a process that normally takes 6 to 8, the level of filling in was almost complete. So that's a testament to really good nutrition. So if you cook up a batch and you're not real fond of the flavor, make it different again. And I also, don't be dismayed. Most people who make bone broth do make a few mistakes here or there. There are a lot of things to remember. But this is good medicine, and it is better than if you were to buy the powders in the store. You know that when you go to the store, you've bought an organic carcass. You know that if you're buying good healthy vegetables, you know you're washing them appropriately, and you know you're cooking it and storing it appropriately. So those are the types of things where you've got more control of the safety of your food that's going in, that's being instantly absorbed. When it comes down to storing your bone broth, it's stored a maximum of 4 days in the refrigerator. This will be all placed on my recipe card that you can find inside of my website. But when it comes down to that 4-day time frame in the refrigerator as maximum time, it's because of food safety. This is why when we make bone broth, we put them in smaller jars and we store leftovers in the freezer, and then you can pull them out when needed. So here we go, let's go. I've already removed the chicken off of this carcass, and what you will see inside of here is lots of bones. We want the bones, but we also want the skin. Believe it or not, you want the skin. The skin, yes, is loaded with fat. You'll see later on we're going to skim off that fat. It chunks off very easily and takes that unhealthy component out of your bone broth. So throw the skin in. because attached to the skin are fibers, collagen fibers. Those collagen fibers is what people pay big bucks for in the store, collagen. Again, amino acids, it's skin, it's hair, it's nails, it's good health. And in fact, you will get so much collagen inside of your bone broth that if you do it right, when your bone broth is cooled, it will actually be gelatinous. After we take the fat off of the top of our jars, you get this jello look because jello has, yes, collagen. So skin in, don't miss that part, and all the bones. And if you see in your disassembling of the carcass and pulling off of the meat, you see the little white pieces of cartilage, put those in. We want that to break down. And breaking down is why we cook this for 24 hours with a little bit of an acid in it to be able to break it down. And when we do it correctly, those knuckle bones at the end of your chicken will actually be so soft you could eat them, and will show up at the bottom of your jars with broken down calcium and nutrients that are all edible or drinkable and absorbable into your body. So here we go. That is everything. So for example, some of the meat's been taken off the chicken wing, and the chicken wing goes in with whatever's remaining. Again, the meat that comes in here, you're just going to filter it out because cooking it for 24 hours in this, and the acid just dries out the meat, and it doesn't do anything for the nutrition or the flavor, or at least not enough to be concerned about. So we are going to be placing in my case, it's the cabbage, celery, and if you're not a celery fan, then go light. I'm going to enjoy the sweetness in this batch because of the apples. Carrots, more sweetness. Spinach, and a half of a lemon, and the peel. The peel has a pectin in it and some other goodies, so that goes in there as well. And then, yes, I'm a fan of sweet peppers. Also, you can throw in a bay leaf, yeah, be creative with your spices. My spices is a lot of garlic. Shoot, if you don't mind garlic, shoot for a lot of garlic. That is so nutritious. And then again, it is the fennel, salt and pepper, and that's going to be that particular batch. And lastly, I'm going to pack in a rather large amount of kale and let that cook down as well. And you're going to see when we return after 24 hours, the kale and all those vegetables and fruit will just easily come out along with the carcass, and you're left with a pretty delightful broth. Okay, so I've already got heated water here that I'm going to add in, and I'm going to let you know of a really important step where a lot of people fail at making bone broth, and that is if you don't have a tight-fitting lid on your crock pot, it'll evaporate out in 24 hours, and you will lose that liquid gold, as I call it. We want to trap in as much liquid as possible. And when it comes down to a crock pot, I usually use a little bit bigger crock pot. I use this one because this is what most people have in their house, just your standard, I don't know how many quarts this is, but it's a smaller crock pot versus the larger one that I do, typically, which has a lid that snaps down and has a rubber seal and locks in all that juicy golden deliciousness. So when you don't have one of those, it's very hard to find a good tight-fitting lid in other types of crock pots. And so this one is loose. And so the little hack that I use is to literally take plastic wrap, making sure it doesn't hit the very hot part of the outside metal of this, and I'm going to seal with a second layer of this crock pot. And when I record the second half of this, you'll see that almost none of the juices have been evaporated from my setup here. So it should work for you. I guess the second tip would be to take your crock pot into a place where you don't mind the house filling up with a lot of smell of cooking crock pot, because it's going to be cooking for at least 24 hours. I choose the garage. It's a place where will attract animals. So if you put it out on your porch and live out in the woods, it may not be there the next day. So choose your cooking place wisely. That is the first part of this bone broth exercise. And as you could see, once the vegetables and things were cut up and ready to go, it didn't take much time to get good nutrition. And I will see you in 24 hours for part 2. Lastly, that crock pot gets run for 24 hours on that low setting. And if you have questions, comments, or even hacks on how to make bone broth more nutritious or taste better, please leave your comments below. I'm Pamela Kluth, and you can find more information about me on PamelaKluth.com. I am wishing you well.